This segment is sponsored by Alice Law, and I am back with attorney Jordan Bush. We're picking up our conversation where we left off, talking about estate planning and the fact that everyone at every age needs to do some bit of planning. But today I know we're going to kind of glance at a couple of different groups, and we want to start with families.
Sure.
Folks with families, where should they be in the planning process, and what should they be doing?
Sure. Young families especially are one of the biggest draws to actually getting that estate plan done. You know, they're having their first child, and they want to make sure if something happens to the parents, that any minor children are taken care of. So certainly if somebody is having a child, if they've had additional children, they need to have their estate plan looked at. One of the documents that we talk about first, though, is called the medical power of attorney. And the reason we start there is we want to make sure that if something happens where somebody doesn't pass away but they're incapacitated, that the right people have the legal access and the legal authority to make medical and care decisions. And usually, you know, we jokingly say with spouses, we want to make sure our spouse has legal access to our identifiable medical information, and then the legal authority to make decisions if we can't make them for ourselves. We also want to have a financial power of attorney, which allows that person to make financial decisions for you if you can't make them for yourselves. We really want to start with those core foundational documents, the powers of attorney, and then we can get a will which would identify a guardian for any minor children if something happened to the parents.
So important to have someone get you by the hand and walk you through that
Yeah.
process. Let's go to middle age.
Sure.
Where should we be in the process at middle age?
Yeah, so in middle age, we often see people who maybe have gotten divorced, or maybe they've gotten remarried, or maybe they've bought or sold a business, or maybe they bought the family cottage. So these are all things that would require us to take a look at their estate plan. You know, so often people said, well, I got that estate plan done 20 years ago, and it's been sitting on the shelf collecting dust ever since. But since life and laws are continuously changing, your estate plan needs to be updated as those things change too. So any major life event, contact your estate planning attorney and say, is this something that we need to update our estate plan for?
What about for folks whose parents are aging? They may be taking care of that young family you mentioned, as well as their aging parents. That's a tough spot.
It's a tough spot to be in the sandwich generation. When you're that couple who's not only taking care of, you know, perhaps your minor or young adult children, but also now starting to take care of mom and dad. And it comes back to legal access and legal authority. So if your parents are beginning to, you know, maybe have some memory loss issues, or maybe having some physical limitations in living independently, you want to make sure that your parents have granted you the legal authority to access your identifiable medical information, but then also given you the authority to make those decisions that they can't participate in themselves. So for the sandwich generation, it's the same set of documents. One's just going up the generational tree and one's facing down the generational tree.
Really, anybody at any age could face difficulties
Absolutely.
with sort of the chores of daily living, right?
Sure.
The activities of daily living. What about those folks? How do you take care of them?
Yeah, so especially if people are realizing that they can't independently take care of themselves anymore, one of the most critical things that we want to know is we want to make sure that we're asking these questions well in advance. We'd rather be early than late. So if you're noticing that your parents are having difficulty preparing food for themselves, or bathing, or getting dressed, we certainly want to make sure that we identify the appropriate level of care that they need. Now, there's a lot of different stages before you're into a full-blown nursing home, and people often mistake, if I'm getting some help, that means I have to go into a nursing home and I lose all of my independence. That's not true. There's a lot of different phases, from independent living to assisted living, before you get up into a full-blown nursing home scenario. We just want to have those conversations before the need arises rather than after.
All right, whatever the season of life, now is the time to start planning. Their website is alicelaw.com. That is where you can get started. We have put a link to it on our site, 13onyourside.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you.